In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create this satisfying swinging spheres looping animation in Blender. Now, a quick disclaimer at the starting of this video, I'm not going to show you the entire process on how to create the exact animation here. I will be showing you how to model the spheres with the strings, and I'll be showing you how to animate them so that they're a looping animation. But I won't be covering how to create the entire scene. At the end of the video, I will be giving you an overview on how I did the lighting and the materials and the rest of the scene, but I'm mainly going to focus on creating the animation and having the spheres animating and not collide with each other and making that a looping animation. And if you'd like to purchase the finished artwork files, then you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. I'll have the links in the description, and purchasing the project files is a great way to help support this channel. Also, definitely let me know if you like these satisfying looping animation videos, and let me know if you'd like me to make more tutorials on these kind of topics. Now, one more thing before we start the tutorial: if you like doing animation in Blender, and if animation is something that you want to get better at, then I highly recommend checking out the Alive Animation course in Blender created by P2 Design. I've reviewed the course myself and I can highly recommend it. It's a very detailed and thorough course on learning animation in Blender. Now, this course is packed with tons of animation content, and some of the content that it includes is showing you the basics of animation, showing you how to add keyframes, explaining interpolation modes, and also showing you how to use the timeline and the graph editor. And there's also some beginner animation exercises that you can follow along in the course. He also shows you how to create a cute squirrel animation using a rigged squirrel character. And the course covers how to make a walk cycle as well as more animation exercises. The course also provides some rigged characters which you can use for your animation practice. And the course has so much more animation content. So if you'd like to learn more about the course, then you can check out the course with my affiliate link in the description. And if you purchase the course through my link, then I'll earn a small commission. And so that's also a great way to help support me as well. All right, so let's jump into this and start with the modeling. So I am in a new scene here in Blender, and I'm just going to turn on my screencast keys so you can see what buttons I'm pressing right down there in the corner. So I'm first just going to select everything and we will delete it. Sorry, default cube. So I'm now going to press Shift A. Let's go here to mesh, and I'm going to add a UV sphere. And then I'll hit the tab key to go into edit mode. I'm going to deselect everything, and here in edit mode, I want to create the string. So I'll press Shift A, and I'm going to go down here and add a cylinder. And right after I add the cylinder, before I move it around, I'm going to click here on the add cylinder settings. And on the vertices here, I'm just going to turn this to 8 so that it has less detail. So the geometry will be less. And I can just close those settings, and I'm now going to scale the cylinder way down, and I'm going to scale it up on the z-axis and then scale it way down even more and bring it up. And I'm just going to make this little string which is attached to the sphere, so something like that. Maybe scale it up a bit more, and I'll go back to object mode, and using the object context menu I will shade the object smooth. Then I'm going to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to select everything, and I want the origin point of the object to be up here, and that way the objects can be rotated by the top here. Because if I go back to object mode, you can see the object is rotating where the origin is. So I'll go back into edit mode, I'll hit G to grab, and bring all of the mesh down, and I'm going to bring all of the mesh down right to where the origin is. Then I can go back into object mode, and I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to bring the entire thing up on the z-axis. So now if I rotate this, because the origin point is right there, it's going to rotate from the very top. And so we can make it look like the sphere is swinging. Now, there is one important thing I want to mention here about the size of the string. So if the string is too small, if the spheres are very high up, then they will probably bump into the other spheres because there just won't be enough space when they are swinging. So you should make sure that the string is long enough. So if you've just added a normal sphere and kept it at its default size, then I find if you zoom out here, you need to make sure that the string is about half a grid long or longer. So if you zoom out here, you can see that there are these grids in Blender, and you can see that this string here is a little bit higher than half of that grid. So you may just want to make it that high, or you can make the string a little bit higher just to make sure the spheres have lots of space when they are swinging. So we can now animate the object, but I don't want to have to animate each object individually because that'll just take a lot of time. I just want to be able to animate one object, and then I want to duplicate the objects and rotate them around so that some of the spheres will be rotating this way and then other spheres will be rotating this way. So to do that, I am going to animate animate this object, but I'm going to parent this object to another object, and we're going to parent it to an empty object. And that way we can rotate the empty, and by rotating the empty, that'll rotate the sphere object, and so that'll rotate the direction that it is swinging. And so we'll be able to rotate all of the spheres at a different angle. So I will press Shift C to center the 3D cursor into the center of the scene, and I'll press Shift A, and I'll go down here to empty, and I'm going to add the plane axis. And let's just bring this up on the Z axis. So I'm now going to select the sphere, and then I'll hold down the Shift key and just select the empty. And I'll press Ctrl P, and we're going to set parent to object, keep transform. So now this empty object is going to move the sphere around if I move the empty. But then this object here, I can still add keyframes and animate it. So if I rotate this up, and now you can see it's going to look like it's swinging, but then I can rotate the empty on the Z axis to change the rotation. So I'll just press Ctrl Z to undo that. So we can now start with the animating. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, so I can just see this from the front, and I'm going to make sure the playhead here is on frame 1 on the timeline. And I'm going to also click right here to turn on the auto key, so that whenever we move an object, it's automatically going to add a keyframe. So I'll now hit R to rotate, and I'm going to type in 50, so 50, and hit enter. I think 50 is a good amount of rotation. So I'm now going to go to frame 60. So you can click and drag here where the numbers are and go to frame 60, or you can also change it right here by changing the active frame. And I now want to rotate this over on the other side, and I want to rotate it by the same amount. So if this is 50 degrees, then rotating it back would be another 50 degrees, but it would be negative instead of positive. So on 60 degrees, I can hit R to rotate, and I'm going to type in -100. So by typing in -100, you can see it's now at the other side. So I'll just hit enter to place that there. And you can see it's now added a keyframe. So now if I go back and forth or hit the spacebar to play, you can see that it's swinging. So now we can go to frame 120, and we can duplicate the first keyframe and move it over so that it is a looping animation. Because whenever you're creating a looping animation, the very end frame needs to be the same as the very starting frame so that it'll loop seamlessly. So I'm going to click right here to select the first keyframe, and you'll know it's selected because it is yellow. So I'll now press Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to drag it over. Now there's that yellow line there, and that is because it's the exact same keyframe, so Blender's telling us nothing is changing. But if I drag it way over here and then click to place it at 120, you can see now we have a keyframe at 1, and then 60, and then 120. So now if I just drag this around here, you can see it is swinging and it's going back and forth. So I now want to set the end frame so that it'll loop seamlessly. Now, if I made the end frame 120, then it wouldn't be perfectly seamless because frame 1 and frame 120 are the same exact location. You can see if I click back and forth here, you can see it looks exactly the same. And so we would have 2 frames which are exactly the same. So instead, I need to make the end frame 119. So I'll change this to 119 here on the end frame. So just change that to 119. So now when it gets to frame 119, it'll go back to frame 1, and so it'll be a looping animation. So if you press the space bar to play, you can see that it is a looping animation, and right when it hits the end, it goes back to the starting. Alright, so we're done with the basic animation, so I'm going to now click on this button to turn off the auto key so we don't accidentally add more keyframes. So now if I select the empty, I can hit R to rotate. I can rotate it on the Z axis, and you can see I can change the angle of the sphere. So this will be super useful when we're adding all the other spheres. So I'm going to select the sphere, and then I'll hold down the Shift key and also select the empty. And I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and then I'll just right click so it stays where it is. And I'm now going to press B for the box select, and I'll click and drag with my middle mouse wheel and drag over the sphere and let go just to deselect it. So I can now just rotate the empty, so I'll rotate it on the Z axis, and I'll rotate it over at a different angle. And if I press 7 on the numpad for top view, I can kind of see that rotation, so I'll just rotate it by about 90 degrees. So now if I play through this, you can see they're going through each other in the very center, but they are at different rotations. So let's just do this a few more times. So I'll hit G to grab, and you can see that one is controlling that sphere. So I'll just hit the escape key to go back. So I'll hold down the Shift key and just select that one there. I'll press 7 on the numpad for top view. And before I duplicate this one, I think I will just rotate it over so that we have one this way and then we have another one that way. So I'll now press Shift D to duplicate, and then I will right click to bring it back to its position. And then I just want to deselect the circle. So I'll hit B for the box select, click and drag with my mouse wheel and let go just to deselect that. And I will rotate this one over. And this one I'm going to rotate kind of like that. So now if I play through this, you can see we have 3 of them, and you can see they are all colliding in the center, but we will fix that in a moment. So I now want to do that one more time. So I'm going to select one of these empties. It doesn't matter which one. Just select this one, and you can see if I hit G to grab, it's connected to this one. So I'll hold down the Shift key, select that one as well. I'll hit 7 on the numpad for top view, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate. Then I can hit R to rotate, and this one I'm going to rotate right up here. So now we have 4 of them, and if I hit the spacebar to play, you can see that they're all going through each other, but when they are far away, they are not colliding with each other. So to make them so that they're not colliding with each other, we just need to change the offset of the keyframes so that the timing of each sphere is a little bit different, so that the center point, when they're in the center, is all going to be at a different time. So this is actually pretty easy to do. So I'm first going to hold down the Shift key and just Shift select all the spheres. So now that they're all selected, we can edit the keyframes of all of them at once. So I will press the A key to select all of the keyframes here in the timeline. And I first want to make it looping farther out. So I want to add keyframes here and then keyframes back here. So I will press Shift D to duplicate, and I can drag this over, and I'm going to stick these duplicated keyframes right on top of the other one. So this one here, stick it on 120. So now if I click and drag and play through this, it's going farther out. And then I'll do the same thing for the back here. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate. I can bring this over here, and this last one here, I'm going to stick it on top of the other one, which is on frame 1, so that it is going to override it. So now if I play through the timeline, it's still going to loop even before and after the different frames which I have selected as the starting and the end. And why I'm doing this is so that I have more space to offset the keyframes. So we're now just going to offset these. So you can really offset this however you want. I'm just going to start by selecting this one here, so this sphere, and then I'll press the A key to make sure that all of the keyframes are selected in the timeline. And I can hit G to grab, and I can move the keyframes around, and you can see that it's going to change the offset or the timing of the keyframes. So if I go back here to frame 1, I can hit G to grab, and I'm going to drag this over until it's about in the center. So now if I play through this, you can see the timing is a little bit off. So this one here is avoiding colliding with the other ones. So we just need to do that for all of the other ones. So I'll just select this one here, and then again, just press the A key to select all the keyframes. And you can press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view. And I'll just move along here, and you can see right when this one goes away, I want this one to come in. So I will hit G to grab and just move this along here, stick it about there. And now if I play through this, you just need to make sure that these two ones which you change the offset are not overlapping. So I could actually bring this over a little bit farther, and you can see it's pretty close, but they're not actually overlapping. So now if I play through this, you can see they almost collide. Let me go back here. And that's really close right there. So I'll hit G to grab in the timeline and just drag this over a little bit farther so there's a bit more space. All right, so now the only ones which are colliding are these two here. So I'm just going to select this diagonal one here, which is going back and forth, and then again press the A key to select all the keyframes. And I can hit G to grab, and I can offset this one again, and you just need to offset it. So just find a spot when there's an open space for it to go through. So you can see right here, that is the perfect spot about frame 100. You can see there is no spheres there in the center. So I can now hit G to grab. I can just bring this through just like that, and now I can just play through this, and you can see that they're not colliding. Now, if I just play through this here, you can see it is colliding here. So I'll hit G to grab and just kind of bring this up a little bit farther. And if I now play through this, you can see this one is slightly colliding. So I'll just select this one, hit G to grab, and just bring the offset back a little bit. And then I'll just need to adjust this one back a little bit more. And then the final one which you have left, it should just fill in the extra spot. But if it doesn't, you can select it, and you can select all the keyframes and just hit G to grab. And you may just need to move it very slightly so that it's not colliding with the other spheres. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the spheres might collide with each other if the strings are not long enough, because they need a bit of space. So if I navigate right here, you can see the strings just aren't quite long enough. So if this is happening, you can hit the tab key to go into edit mode. Then you can deselect everything, and you can go into wireframe, and you can just click and drag to box select the sphere in the bottom of the string. And then what you can do to move the sphere down is you can hit G to grab, and then you can tap the Z key once and then tap the Z key again. And if you tap the Z key twice, that is going to switch to using the local axis instead of the global axis. So you can just hit G to grab, double tap the Z key and bring it down, and you could do that for the other ones as well, so bring them down if they are not quite long enough. But hopefully that won't be an issue if you modeled them correctly and gave the string enough length. And so there we have it. It really is that easy. So now we have all these spheres and they're not colliding with each other. So at the end of this video, I will have an overview on how I created some of the other things like the lighting and the materials, but now I'm going to show you how to render these out to frames and then compile them in Blender's video editor to make a looping animation. So you can first add a camera by pressing Shift A, going here and adding a camera, but I'm just going to place the camera pointing at the objects. I'll hit the space bar to play and I'll just rotate this and stick it about there. Now to render the animation to images, you can go right over here to the output properties. And then right down here on the file format, you can use either PNG or JPEG. I'm going to use JPEG to keep the file size a bit smaller, but then I'll turn the quality here to 100. So we need to now add a folder that all the rendered images can be put into. So let's click here on this file icon. And then you can locate to a place on your computer where you have all your project files. You can click on the plus here to create a new folder, and you can call this like frames, and then you can go into the folder and then click on the accept button. So now it's going to render out all the frames to that folder. So then you can of course do all of the other render settings, and then you can click on render and you can render the animation, or you can use the shortcut key of Ctrl F12. So once the images are all rendered, you can open up a new scene in Blender and you can click on File, you can click on New, and you can click here on Video Editing. And then here in the video editing layout, you can press Shift A in the sequencer and you can click on Image or Sequence. And then you can navigate to the folder where you saved all the rendered frames, and to make them play in the correct order, you need to click on the drop down arrow here and you need to sort by name. And this way it'll start out as 1 and then 2 and 3 and etc. So I'll press the A key to select all the frames and I'll now click on Add Image Strip. And then right when you add the image strip, you should make sure the frame rate is the frame rate that you used in the other Blender file. I used 24 frames per second. And another thing you can do is select the strip, and then you can click here on strip and you can click on set render size. So it'll set the correct render size. So now if I press the space bar to play, you can see the animation. Now you can add sound effects if you want. I added a few sound effects from a free website called freesound.org where you can get free sound effects. So I'll have the links in the description to the sound effects that I used if you'd like to add them. And then once you add the sound effects, you can select the strip and the sound effects, and you can press Shift D to duplicate, and you can stick the strips after the first ones. And then you can just bring the end frame out, so just bring the end frame over as long as you want, and you can continue to duplicate the frames and drop them before the other ones. So now if I play through this, you can see that it will be a looping animation. And then to render this out to a final video, you can set an output right here. So I usually just render mine to the desktop, so you can click on the file icon and you can set an output. And then here on the file format, I use FFmpeg video. So then you can save your video editing file, you can click on render, and you can render the final animation. So I'll now just give you an overview of some of the other things that I did for the scene, like the lighting and the materials. So for the lighting, I used this Blue Photo Studio HDRI from polyhaven.com, links in the description if you'd like to download it, and it gives some pretty nice lighting to the scene. Also, if you go here to the render properties and then open up the color management, I used filmic and very high contrast to make the colors look nicer. So then I did some more simple modeling to make the scene more interesting. So for some of these spheres here, I added a bit more details. So for this one here, you can see that I added this little ring here of wood. And then this one here, I just left it how it is and I made this wood. Then this one over here, again, I also left this how it was, but this one was metal. And then this one over here, I also added these cool little pieces here. So this one is again a mix of wood and metal. And then I also modeled this cool piece here. So this was very simple. I just went here to mesh and I just added a circle. And then once I added the circle, I just extruded it out sideways so it had some thickness, and I just deleted half of the circle so there's only half of it. And then to give it more thickness, I went here to the modifiers and I added the solidify modifier and also the bevel modifier so that it is beveled on the edges. And then for this little plaque piece here, this was pretty simple. I just added added a circle and I just extruded it down, and I just also added some bevels to the edges. And then this object here was really easy. This was just a plane, so I added a plane and scaled it up, and then I extruded the plane down, and then again to make the edges round, here on the modifiers, I just added a bevel modifier. And then these other planes here, these are just planes that I used for lights. So I just added an emission material to these lights. I set the strength to 10 and kind of made it this slight red color, and it just gives a bit more light to the scene. And it also gives some cool reflections there in the spheres. So I'll now just show you some of the materials which I added. So the string material was very simple. I basically just made it a very dark color and I made it slightly brown. Now for the wood here, I used my Wood 0 material from my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack. So with my Ultimate Procedural Material Pack, I've added all of my procedural materials and they're pre-set up in Blender's asset browser, and all of the materials also have customizable node groups so that you can customize the material. So if you have my Ultimate Blender Procedural Material Pack, you can add my wood material and you can just drag and drop it from the asset browser onto your object, and then you have many different settings like the overall scale and the roughness and the wood colors. And if you'd like to learn how to create this wood material, then I actually have a tutorial on my YouTube channel on how to create it, so you can find the link in the description to that tutorial. And if you'd just like to purchase this material here, you can also purchase the wood material on my Gumroad store. Again, link is in the description. So I added my procedural wood material to these objects here, and then I also added another procedural wood. This is Wood 2 in my Ultimate Procedural Material Pack. Again, I'll have a link to this wood material as well. Now for the metal material, this was just a simple procedural material that I made. So I turned the metallic value to 1 so that it is metallic, and then I also added this noise texture here and a color ramp, and I stuck this into the roughness. In this way, it just gives a little bit of variation to the roughness, and it makes the metal look a bit more realistic. So you can see here in the reflections, there are some parts which are a little bit less shiny, and so it just makes the metal look a bit more realistic, and it gives a bit of surface imperfections. And then I also gave these spheres, again, a very simple metal material, and I made it very shiny. Another thing I did for the final render is I added a depth of field so that the background is blurred, but then the objects are in focus. And then because this is an animation, another really important thing that I did is I went here to the render properties and I turned on the motion blur. That'll just give a tiny little bit of blur when the spheres are moving very fast, and it'll make it look more realistic. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and thanks for watching. And if you'd like to purchase the project files and help support the channel, then you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page with the links in the description. And I do really appreciate your support. It really does help me to keep on creating these free tutorials. So I hope you enjoyed this, I hope you found it helpful, and thank you for watching.